FD RX7. With its 13B twin-turbo power plant and its extremely nimble handling, this makes the FD3S the perfect car for tuners all over the world. And now with prices skyrocketing all over, Dave and Justin thought this would be the perfect addition to the Hexlab lineup of JDM hero cars.
Welcome back to another episode of Hexlab in the shop. Today we've got the FD RX7. We're going to be getting this thing running. It's got a bit to do. Dave's in there at the moment, just checking seat position and steering wheel. You found in there, Dave?
Just enough foot room.
Just enough. So you're going to put a deep dish wheel on it?
Definitely needs to be.
Get the steering wheel back a bit, get off the knees.
Just enough headroom.
They're pretty small cars, aren't they? Bit of a, like you say, a bit of a death trap, but you gotta love it. Oh, Dave suits you. We've also got to get the engine running on stock Series 5 turbo initially, and then we're going to modify it up to hopefully about 250 to 300 rear wheel kilowatt. And I'm thinking that should be good for 12s, pretty easy 12s, maybe an 11. I'd be pretty happy with an 11. And so we'll lower it down, chuck some good wheels on it, and get it looking a bit better. Some of the stuff we're going to do on it is just tidying up some of the panel work. Take these, delete these off, rear wiper hole, weld those up, aerial. No, we don't do that anymore. Whether or not to modify this car, obviously they are gaining value rapidly in New Zealand's market and Japanese market, and it is quite stock under the bonnet, but throwing caution to the wind. I want the boys to be happy. We go to the drag day and have a good blast, so we're going to throw caution to the wind here and modify it. Otherwise, what's the point really, eh? Alright, so what we're doing with the baddie today is we've taken out a few of the holes that we didn't want, so the aerial, the rear wiper, and there's some reflectors that go on the rear quarters which we also didn't want. So Daly's gone ahead and welding up some plates that we made to fit specifically in there. Also, we've had a few repairs that we've done under the car, so the sill needed a slight repair, and also inside the car. So we've repaired those all up now, and the car is looking really good in terms of the chassis, the body. We're going to try and get the car running on a single turbo conversion. We don't have the twins to put on. We've also got a Power FC computer that was nicely donated to us by Logan at BCE Engineering, and we're going to fit that up with the single turbo conversion, a big fuel pump, some big injectors and rails, and see if we can make about 300 kilowatt wheel from this setup before we break the engine down and look at rebuilding it with possibly a stage 2 port or maybe Bridgeport. We'll see how we go with that. But we just want to get it running and see how the car goes, maybe take it to an event, drags or something, see what we can do with it. Just finished the underbody repairs on the FD. The fill's all nice and straight, and a few of the punched in bits punched back out, like the sill here and up in the front section. So those are all looking pretty good. Something about this car, it's got all the factory heat shields, gearbox shield, cat converter, which I'm just taking out, which is a real bastard. Even these shields here around the diff and drive shaft and fuel tank. Here is pretty interesting. Oh, fuel tank's back here. Let's get one on here as well. What we're going to do is take the cat converter out and get this car back on the ground, where we'll start fitting up the turbo, and then we can do the mid pipe, so the front pipe up to the exhaust, up to the back of the turbo, and we'll find out where that's going to be. Alright, got the cat converter out. She's a big sucker. We'll be able to get a fair bit for that at the scrap metal. We've got this little pipe here that it can all come off. That's like an emissions thing that goes back up to feed into the engine. We've got all that off now. We can start from the rear pipe, come through the mid pipe and up into the front pipe. Okay, so what we're doing today is we're actually removing the ABS unit. We're going to de-ABS this car. Initially I was going to try and comply it to get it back on the New Zealand roads, but I'm not really going to go that way now. I've decided to modify the car how I want to modify it. It's going to make better content for you guys, and it's just fun, so why would we want to do that? So right now we're going to rip the ABS out. We're going to make some space. We're probably going to take off the aircon compressor, and we're going to make some space for the new turbo. And then Daddy's going to go ahead and fill up some front pipe, down pipe, and intercooler piping, and an intercooler V-mount as well. So that's the plan for the car in the short term. Out there comes. And we'll pull all these lines out as well, and we do the lines so they're all nice and clean. It's pretty ugly, all this stuff here. You can see the car's been semi-primed. It was red before, semi-primed. When we take the motor out to rebuild it, we will be painting the engine bay all nicely and it'll look sharp. But until then, you're just going to suffer the ugliness. So yeah, let's get in and rip it apart. Okay, so we just trial fitting the turbo on the FD, and the car came with a stainless manifold and this TO4 turbo. It's not super flash, but it's all we've got to work with at the moment. I thought, well, let's chuck it on, see if we can get it going with that turbo and tune it up, and at least see what it does before we pull the motor out and refreshen the seals and springs and the clutch and gearbox. So we want to get it driving and see how it all performs before we pull it all apart again. This particular manifold was made for a T4 flange, and we only have a T3 split pulse, so we are running the adapter on here, which obviously not ideal, but it will get us going, and we'll decide from there whether we want a T4 turbo or change the manifold if it's too thin or whatever. So these are all things that we need to work through and work out what we want to do. So what we've found is with the spacer, it's pushed the turbo a little bit too far towards the body and hitting on the side here. Even with the turbo clocked around, it's still fouling on here. And you can see here there's still a bit of a gap between the flange and the turbo. So we will go ahead and cut through the spacer here and angle this flange up to bring the turbo back towards the motor, as we still have quite good clearance here. Not a lot, but enough that we can bring it over 10 mil and give us that little bit of clearance there. She's a big boy, eh boy? Cool. So next plan, next mission. Cut that bad boy. While we're there, we'll probably put a plate in the middle. The manifold's obviously split pulse, as is the turbo, but the spacer isn't. So it's a good opportunity to create a split pulse divider to match it all up. What are you doing over here, man?
Just blocking off this little thing.
Oh, nice, making some emissions. Some emissions blank off plates.
I got one here, you can see.
Oh, yeah. Cute little one there. What's that alloy? Stainless alloy? 3 mil alloy. Job nicely, and you've used some of that red 3-inch outlets. I think it's an 82 rear housing, so it's pretty small turbo for a rotary, but I'm hoping that with the restrictions in the manifold, it should enable us to be able to hold the boost down, whether we run a 44, 50 or 60 mil gate. Obviously big is better. I really love the sound of the old Arnie's old Peachy RX7, and I think that must have had maybe twin 38 gates or something, but it sounded so cool. Rest in peace, Arnie. So, as I was saying, David's gone ahead and done the oil return for the turbo. So everything's looking pretty good. We've got to do the down pipe to the exhaust and the oil feed still, but it's pretty simple. So we'll go through in videos for the next video and work out what we're going to do with the water pump, power steering, alternator, how we're going to balance those. We're going to put them back in the factory position, or whether we're going to change it up with the electric water pump and so on. Quite a few things still left to do in the car. We're going to round this video up with what we've done so far. And on the next one we look forward to trying to get the piping together, V-mount intercooler, the Phoenix intercooler, V-mount position. And also I've got a couple other things I've got to fit up. I've got these fuel rails that came with the car. I'm not sure if we'll use them or not, but we want to put in some bigger injectors with aftermarket ECU and get a bit of fuel in there to get the 300 odd kilowatt that we're looking for. As well as that, obviously the car is looking pretty shabby. We've got a few other parts that we want to try and fit up. We've got this off Ryan from Luxury Sports in Auckland, like a ducktail wing for it, so I think that'll look pretty cool. As well as changing the wheels out and some coilover suspension to drop it down a bit. Eventually, obviously, we're going to pull the motor, rebuild it, paint the engine bay, and eventually paint the whole car. So some of the other things that we're going to do with the car is, once we've got the V-mount set up, we're going to do some aluminium plumbing to pipe all that up, much like we did on Jarris's FD back in 2007, this RX7, and I really like the way the plumbing looked on that, so we're going to try and recreate that. Some of the parts we're going to need to complete this build are the G-Ready aluminium elbow off the intake. That's quite an integral part to getting the plumbing going the right way. As well as maybe a 50mm wastegate, 3-inch radiator, stainless, 3-inch stainless for the downpipe for the exhaust. What else we've got here? And a bias valve for the brakes because we've taken the ABS off. So we'll be doing some sort of brake bias valve to reproportion the front and rear brakes and try and do the least amount possible to get the car running and use it and see what else you might need. So I hope you enjoyed the video. We look forward to bringing you a second episode on the RX7 and seeing what we can do to get it going and get it functional. This is some of the stuff we'll be doing for the next video, so stay tuned. See you back.